Okay. All right, good. Looks like it is recording. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are joining us from. And welcome back to yet another entry in the Professional Advancement Workshop Series, or PAWS. Now, these workshops are not science seminars, but they are here to give you training to complement your scientific research skills. You will learn professional skills and will have the opportunity to network with experts in fields that you might have known existed, but you've never been able to interact with. And while these are geared more for graduate students, everyone is welcome to participate. So my name is Dr. Jessica Noviello, she, her. I'm the Nexus NASA Postdoctoral Management Program Fellow. So before we begin, I just have a couple of details to go over. First, thank you so much to the NASA Astrobiology program for sponsoring these events. I specifically want to thank Mary Wojtek, Melissa Kervin-Brooks, and Sean Domagal-Goldman for their time and effort. Second, we are using Zoom for this meeting. I'm sure you have guessed that by now, but please keep yourself on mute during the presentations and the introduction. On the bottom of the Zoom screen, there is a box that says reactions. You can use those buttons to interact with the speaker and raise your hand if you want to ask a question. So if you want to speak, I can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself after you're called on. And feel free to use some of the other reactions that are there: thumbs up, applause, smiley faces, anything you want. Now, finally, I will gently remind everyone that there is a code of conduct in place for these and all PAWS events, and I will drop that link right here. And just if you ever have something that you'd like to talk about, feel free to reach out to me or to Melissa or Sean. One of us can address your concerns as quickly as possible. So without further ado, thank you all for returning. I know it's been a while since we had a PAWS meeting, but today is one of the topics that the community has been asking for over a year, and that is science and social media and where they intersect and how we can use social media better to share our science. And we have a wonderful panel set up today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they will do a phenomenal job. And I just can't wait to see what your questions are. Feel free to use the Slido to ask your questions and upvote other questions. So, okay, I think we are ready to launch into introductions. David, you were the first one to join Zoom, so would you mind kicking it off?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is David Schiffman. I'm a marine conservation biologist at Arizona State University. I also do a lot of work with online public science engagement. I'm one of the most followed scientists in the world on social media. I've given how to use social media for public science engagement workshops on 6 continents. And have trained about 1,000 early career researchers how to do this. It's also been a major force shaping my research on public understanding of ocean conservation issues and the causes and consequences of misunderstanding. So a lot of the stuff that I work on has to do with endangered and threatened species of sharks and sustainable fisheries management and various threats to the ocean and their policy solutions. I've been on Twitter since 2009. Which means I remember when Twitter used to be fun. I was one of the first 5,000 or so people on Facebook. I'm just now in the middle of the beta test of Blue Sky, which is the new thing. So I spend a lot of my time figuring out how to more effectively reach the public about issues of conservation concern using these emerging online tools. My PhD from the University of Miami in ecosystem science and policy. And then I did a postdoctoral fellowship in conservation leadership, which includes a lot of professional development training. And now I live and work in the Washington, D.C. area. Yes, Arizona State has a campus here in Washington, D.C. That I'm to. And I also run my own communication consulting firm here in D.C. What else was I supposed to say there, Jessica? Sorry.
I think you said quite a bit already.
Great.
I will note that you have actually published on science and social media, and you teach about it too.
Yes. I also have my undergraduate students do a follow experts on social media assignment over the course of a semester, and every week they're just asked to casually check in and report on something neat that they learned from that, and that's been a fun passive learning example. But yeah, I've done several long-term research projects on actually what works in terms of reaching people with social media.
Thank you so much. Next up, we will have Molly, who I will note was so instrumental in getting this panel off the ground, from an idea to an actual event. So thank you so much, Molly. I can't wait to learn from you.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to learn from my fellow panelists here. David, that was quite an introduction. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say today. So I am Molly Wasser. I am the social and digital media lead for planetary science at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. So I also live in the Washington, D.C. area. And I co-run the NASA Solar System social media accounts with my colleague Bill here, and I run the NASA Moon social media accounts on Twitter and Facebook, and NASA Solar System is Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And I came to social media, and social media was just starting when I was in college. It's not like I was like, I want to do social media as a career, but I was a film major and astronomy minor in undergrad, and I loved combining art and science. And then I made videos about astronomy for a number of years at the Harvard Observatory, and I became very interested in the educational aspects of multimedia. So I went to graduate school for education. So my graduate degree is in education and educational technology with a focus on science and particularly physics education. So I started working at NASA Goddard 5 or 6 years ago, and just doing public engagement and outreach. And then I realized that social media was a fun way that I could teach people about science through multimedia. So it was a way to combine all of these interests in one place and get to talk to people directly. And so since then, I've been in the field, and I'm excited to share some of the lessons I've learned along the way, and also some of the things that we still don't know. Social media can be very mysterious as well. So yeah, excited to speak with you all today.
Thank you so much for being here. And Bill, I think you're up next.
Yeah, I'm Bill Dunford at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. I actually work from my home base in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's a pre-pandemic thing. I kind of pioneered that, I guess. So I've been with JPL for almost 10 years now. As Molly mentioned, I work with her on the NASA Solar System accounts. I also have responsibility for some specific missions, a Clipper mission, which launches in October of next year, as well as Juno. And I focus through NASA Solar System on other Psyche and other missions that NASA is doing. In the past, I ran the social media for the Cassini mission to Saturn, and my resume is not nearly as impressive as David's, and I can't wait to take his class because I really need it. But the one thing I have is that while we were doing the end of mission communication for Cassini, we actually won an Emmy for the package we put together to talk to the public about how and why we were ending that mission. And so that was a part of my career that I did not expect to happen. I'm now going to go for the EGOT, which is the the Grammy, the Tony, and the Oscar. That's all I need left. So I'm close. But it's a great field to work in. As Molly said, it's constantly changing, which I really enjoy. Constantly challenging, a little bit mysterious, but it's always exciting to find new ways to share science. And I think that's about it for me.
Well, congratulations on the Emmy.
Well, it's 5 years ago now, so gonna milk
I
for as long as possible.
I still think that's super cool. And as David noted in the chat, that if you want to win a Grammy, go to the audiobook sphere. And Kara says awards don't expire, which is true. So once again, just thank you all for being here. And I don't see Jessica on the call. So I will just think that she got caught up with technical difficulties, and when she gets here, we will introduce her. But I think we can start with questions now. So, let me slide over. So if you have been following around with the, or if you've been on the Slido page, there is a word cloud up. It says, what is one word or phrase that comes to mind when you think of social media? And some of the words say advertising, one word is exhausting, keeping up with the world, viral, public, information. We also have some words like toxic and frustrating. So social media can be all of these things and often at the same time. So is there a question in here that I can ask? I suppose I just wonder, I'll kick it off with this question of, how is using Twitter as part of your job, or even, as a big part of your job, how is that different from using it on a more personal level? And what if any differences are there in terms of the content that you tend to share? Or I'm not sure if this is making sense as a question, but basically just how is it different when you do social media as a job versus just as something that you do for fun?
I can address that a little bit. One thing I left out of my intro is that I got into the field because I was doing what I do for NASA almost exactly as a hobby for about 10 years before they hired me. I had kind of a science education website and podcast and all of that about robotic space exploration. And JPL came to me and said, hey, do you want to do that for us? And I thought about that for about 1/24 of a second and said, yes, I would like to come do this for NASA. And I continue to do that. So my hobby and my jobs, so these two sides you're addressing kind of touch and sometimes even overlap for me, because some of the, I do, for example, I do astrophotography as a hobby, and I often use those images, get used by me and others at the agency. And I would say the first thing that comes to mind is just the responsibility in that when you're speaking for yourself, and I think this applies to everybody who's working in science, when you're doing your own account, it's your own account. When you are doing it professionally or doing it on behalf of an institution or a team, then obviously that gives you an entire different set of responsibilities in terms of being effective for that team and organization, and also protecting that team and organization, and making sure that what you're sharing is correct, ethical, legal, and is advancing that institution's goals, and so that requires an extra level of care and editing of colleagues' work to make sure that you're collaborating to make sure that what you're putting out there is in the interests of the what you're responsible for. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. The scope of the responsibility certainly increases. Yeah.
I can, I'll just say, so I actually hardly ever use Twitter personally. I am pretty spare in my personal social media posts. I spend a lot of time on social media, but I think doing social media professionally has made me very aware of my voice. I think the power of social media and is you can make yourself a brand. And NASA as an agency has been very successful in branding itself as really engaging on social media, I would say. But as individual scientists, you can also make yourself a brand. So I always like to tell scientists I work with, imagine that everything you're tweeting, everything you're posting, a reporter can just lift and put in an article. So it's something to think about. And I think because I do it for work, it is my job. And so I spend a little bit less time just posting personally. And I think also for many of you who are interested in getting your science out through social media, if you work with social media or communications professionals within your organization, it's a way to get your science out while also kind of protecting you a little bit from that. There's many positives to having being an individual on social media, but there's also positives to having like my name. People don't know that I'm NASA Moon and NASA Solar System. I have a little bit of that protection as well.
Anything to add, David? All right.
Yeah, that's more of a question for the folks that run the institutional accounts, I think.
All right, we have a few questions from the audience now, so I'm going to save some others. So the top rated question is, what are different SciComm careers that someone with a science background could potentially do both in and out of NASA?
I can answer that one. So I've my entire career, I've done various science communications jobs. So there's social media, there's public affairs officers. That's kind of more working with the media, journalists. There's public engagement, which is another thing that I do. So I go to a lot of events, I go to schools, and I talk to people. There's science, there's things more on the education side, developing educators' guides, developing activities, developing programs. There's really so much. I once developed an educator's guide for an IMAX film that was all about the history of all of time. So there's many, many different arenas. And then within NASA, we have all of those jobs.
I'll answer this one. So I don't know anything about careers within NASA, which is why I think I was asked to be here to give a different perspective, but other sorts of jobs. A job as a science communicator did not exist when I started doing this. This was something that journalists did on the side, that scientists did on the side, that educators did on the side. And there was not a job as a science communicator. There were museum docent volunteers were about the closest you got. And now there's a whole realm of these, and there is a jobs board for them that you can get through the Association of Science Communicators, which is a new professional organization that just started this year. But a lot of these things are writing copy for educational websites or back-end editing of podcasts, producer type things, editor type things. And more it's developing content strategies for institutions. Sometimes that's for a smaller institution, so not for a NASA, but for something like JPL. But increasingly there are more and more larger scale ones out there. Those usually require a little more experience, but lots of professional societies are increasingly hiring part-time people to help run their public engagement. That includes social media, it includes the blog, it includes the website. Running public events is an event, or is something for sure. So there's a lot of different stuff that's out there, and it's not all writing, it's not all speaking. Sometimes it's training people on the back end. Yeah. Graphic designer, that's a big one. I through my consulting firm, I am garbage at graphic design. I outsource that. I write that into budgets that you're hiring me to do this, and I'm going to work with you to make a graphic design thing through this external person who is better at this than me. So if you're good at graphic design and you're good at podcast editing, you can get a job doing this tomorrow.
And Molly also noted in the chat about video producers. And Bill, I know you do a lot with digital media as well. Can you speak to that?
On a small scale, I make short videos for social posts. I wouldn't call myself a video producer, but I will do something like, if we're talking about a Juno flying by Jupiter, I'll take our Eyes on the Solar System 3D solar system simulator, and I'll do a flyby in the simulator, and I'll make a video of that, and then use that. I'm not typically involved in something that has the NASA logo on it at the end, which requires a lot more review, although sometimes.
Some of those videos are absolutely stunning. So the JPL office does excellent work. Thank you.
I'm very privileged to work with some of the best in the industry. JPL's multimedia people are the top notch.
Agreed. So actually, oh, good. We have so many more questions. I am going to use moderator privilege, though, to ask about what is it like to run the Twitter account or a social media account for a mission?
Well, Molly can speak to this as well. It's one of my favorite things I do. For most of the missions I work with, I'm sort of embedded into the team, and I'll attend, some of their meetings, some of their science meetings, and it's enjoyable to take the amazing work that the engineers and scientists are doing on these missions and try to put them into a publicly accessible format and get people excited about them. I don't know if I'm giving really any insights here. There's a lot that goes into it to help people understand the mission's objectives, and it's research, it's science, and there is a little bit of push and pull that can happen between the social media teams and the project and the mission project in terms of how much can be said and when, and how often to post, and what will be interesting to the public and what isn't. And I think that it's an important part of that collaboration that needs to happen between the communication professionals and the science professionals. There needs to be mutual respect and close coordination to make sure that each side is doing their job and respecting the other's area of expertise. Does that ring true to you, Molly?
Yeah, I think that was really well said. So Bill and I kind of we split up the solar system a little bit in terms of our missions. I think his point about being embedded within the mission is a good one. So like this week I spent at the OSIRIS-REx science team meeting learning the science, but the whole time I was there thinking about, what can I share with the public? What will be interesting to the public? And kind of looking for stories. And I think a lot of times as scientists, you're so involved, rightfully in your work, that it sometimes is really helpful to have a communications person or an outside person come in and say, this is so cool what you're doing. And something that you may take for granted is, to me as a non-scientist, is completely fascinating. For example, I went to Iceland with a bunch of planetary geologists a few years ago, and I took a picture of a few different kinds of rocks and tweeted it, and it did really well on Twitter, and all the geologists were like, we see these rocks all the time. We wouldn't even have thought of it. And I was like, but this one's a volcanic rock. And it's really fun because I'm able to come in and look for stories. And I think the scientists get excited too, like knowing that people in the public do care about what you're doing.
Yeah, just to add to that about things that often surprise the experts themselves about what does and does not result in public engagement. Sometimes the results aren't your story. Sometimes the results aren't the hook, the thing that you found, or you might not, and in some of your missions, you're not going to find it for years and years. But sometimes the results are not the thing that we want to communicate or the thing that people are interested in. Sometimes it's the method. Sometimes it's the question, why are we doing this? Sometimes it's the co-authors, who's involved in this. Sometimes the news story is, for the first time, we're sending a Canadian to the moon, or whatever you guys are doing now. So just be with the way that we get each other excited is not necessarily the same thing as the way that we can use what we do to get the public excited.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think social media is such a great way to show scientific process and to show the teamwork involved and who's behind the science. So that's really interesting.
And that's another good argument for what we were saying about embedding, however that looks like in your institution, bringing in the communicators early and often. So that those kind of stories can reveal themselves, and don't just wait for when the paper goes out, and don't think just in terms of press releases. I mean, that's great, and there's no disrespect to my media colleagues, but there's so many more options than press releases when the paper goes out. So work with your communication team, or if that's you, be thinking about how you can tell those stories throughout the process, like they were just saying.
So on the topic of good advice, I'd like to ask this question from the audience. So so if you're interested in starting a social media platform or portfolio for SciComm, how should one go about that? And what advice would you give to someone just starting out?
Read the paper I just put in the chat. Explicitly to answer that question, a step-by-step guide to getting started on Twitter, Facebook, and blogs, and the different relative strengths and benefits and limits of each of those. It's explicit. This is one of the most frequent questions I get, and I wrote the paper specifically to answer it, and there's an open access link in the chat.
I will be sure to include that in the when I put this up on the webpage. I'll make sure that this resource is included in that same space as well. So, okay, very clearly a common question. What about, how about the flip side of this then? Well, actually, first I should back up and say, Molly and Bill, do you want to add on to David's paper?
I doubt it. I like to read David's paper.
Okay. So let's say you are starting a social media presence for an organization or maybe a lab. When you have limited time to spend on that work, where should you focus? What are some tips and strategies for that? And David, my apologies if your paper also covers this scenario.
Nope, it's more for individual experts within an organization than for institutional accounts. So this is a good question.
Social media can eat your life. It can take up as much time as you want it to take up. So when I started NASA Moon in 2017, and I spent a certain amount of time every day, and I got really into it, and I was spending a little bit too much time on it. But so I would say I kind of like set a timer, maybe like I don't know how like 30 minutes to an hour to spend some time. I think when you're starting a social media account, it's really important to look at what similar accounts are doing to engage. Social media is social. So you don't want to just go on and start posting about your own stuff. You really want to engage with other accounts. I also think that a lot of people, so I guess I started by saying don't spend too much time on it, but I think it's really important to spend time on it. I think a lot of labs start social media accounts not knowing what they're going to do with it, and that you really need to give them care and feeding. I don't know, it's a pet. Like, you have to feed it every day. You have to go on, you have to check on it. And so I really advocate for this within NASA. When I have scientists come to me and say, I want to start a social media account for my lab, I really advise them to think about it carefully before starting one. Do you have someone who can take care of this?
Yeah, I agree with everything Molly's saying. And what one thing I think is really important there is to think about it strategically and to ask yourself the age-old questions that you do in any communication, which is, who is your audience? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? You know, what are your objectives? Don't just start a social media account because people have them. You know, and I think that going into with that attitude will really address a lot of what Molly's saying there, is that, you know, what is it that you're trying to do? How are you going to measure success? You know, and then you can gauge from there what to focus on, how many hours to spend on it. And if you, I imagine if you looked at David's papers, looking at the strengths and weaknesses and audiences that are typical for the different platforms, that'll help you think through who, you know, where are the people that I'm trying to reach? You know, what is it that I want them to do with this information? And if you ask yourself those questions early and often, then, you know, then you can focus your hours on the most important things.
Yeah, with respect to knowing your audience, and I have an amusing example of this that I think hammers that important point home. That I was doing one of my workshops in Brazil, and afterwards someone came up to me and said, "Oh, I didn't know that Twitter could do all these things. I'm so excited to go back home and use Twitter to reach my target audience, which is shark fishermen in Belize, but they don't use Twitter. So how can I use Twitter to reach them?" Well, you can't. It's that simple. If your audience is not, you have to go where your audience is. You're not, no one's going to sign up for an account so that they can learn about what your lab is doing. You go where your audience is. And if you don't know where your audience is, find out. This information is not secret. These social media platforms, there's a great tool called the Pew Internet and Society Report, which is a American specific but very, very detailed breakdown of who uses what social media platforms. And the platforms themselves brag about this because it's a way to attract advertisers. For me, I'm trying to reach science journalists, and I'm trying to reach policy savvy wonks, and I'm trying to reach decision makers, and Twitter is the best tool ever invented for that. Sometimes I want to reach people who vaguely know me, but in real life. That's Facebook. Dr. Craig McLean, who is an early pioneer of online science communication, calls that being the nerd of trust. Someone who is not necessarily, you might not be that kind of scientist, but you're the only scientist that the person you went to summer camp with 20 years ago knows, and they might be more likely to listen if it's coming from you. So that's an important role of a smaller audience. Everyone always giggles when I say this, but this is something that the company brags about. If your target demographic for your science outreach is unmarried women in their 30s, Pinterest is the best tool ever created for reaching that demographic. And there's lots of science education outreach projects where that would be your target demographic. So if you don't know where your audience is, don't start this yet. That's an important first step. You don't want to put tons of time into making a platform that's just not going to reach what people are saying, no matter what you do. So Bill, you're out west now, right? You're somewhere in the southwestern US. If you stuck your head out your window and screamed as loud as you could we hear it? We could not. No matter how important your message is, no matter how clever your message is, that's not the right tool to reach us, this audience. So just keep that in mind with all of this stuff. It doesn't matter the relative strengths or benefits or weaknesses of these tools if your target audience isn't using them.
That is a really, really good point, because you don't want to put effort into something and have and effectively it just becomes a spinning wheel where you're not getting anywhere. It's there are so many like exercise analogies here. The running on the treadmill. There are lots of questions. Keep the questions coming, everyone. We still have about 20 minutes left to go.
While you're looking, Jessica, a quick important follow-up to that discussion, I think, is looking at your results. One of the great things about social media, as opposed to back in the day when we just had a newspaper or whatever, is you can immediately and in great detail usually see who's looking and who's responding and who's engaging with your posts. So make sure that you understand that a big part of your job, if you're going to be doing a social media account, is that looking at the metrics and seeing what's working and interacting with people, like Molly said, reading feedback, getting a vibe for how people are responding, and analyzing what's working for you and what's not, and for other accounts too, and to see what they're doing. Sorry.
No need to apologize. I should have checked that. Can we have the link for the audience analytics? I think if you're asking about like social media, oh, there we go.
It's a program within the Pew Charitable Trusts, and they have they have a ton of reports about different platforms. They just came out with the 2022 Twitter one, but there's a ton of information is on the Pew Internet and Society page.
Thank you. So, Bill, I'm actually going to follow up with a question from the audience. So do you have any tips as a content creator representing an org or even representing yourself to reduce the intellectual load of making novel, engaging, and frequent posts?
Yeah, that I wish. Yeah, I hope so. In my case, I have a little bit easy sometimes on that, because what I'm posting about is often a product that already exists. So, for example, I'm posting about a press release, or the bulk of the content is in a press release, and I don't have to do a ton of the writing or research about it. And often I don't have to illustrate it because those things are included. And I think that's one thing that's going to be often true for people who are institutions. You've got other teams who are doing that. I don't know, but there are other cases where we are doing it largely from scratch. And I have to think about it. Molly and David chime in. There are having good creation tools is important. Knowing the resources. Again, this is NASA specific maybe, but one of the great things is that we have so many resources that are available. We have a lot of interactives, and we have a lot of video. We have just many terabytes of imagery. And so this all, this treasure trove of stuff that I can draw from, and I don't have to make from scratch. When you do, that's a good question. Any other ideas, Molly?
Yeah, I mean, well, one is have collaborators. So Bill and I get ideas just by talking to each other. I also think just particularly in science, I think just in our daily interactions with people, there's things come up. Like I was having a conversation with a friend and she's like, "Oh, is Mercury in retrograde right now?" And I was like, Mercury is in retrograde. And so I did a post about what that means. So I guess it's a little bit of how you come up with ideas, but I think I also think it takes practice. I now am very good at writing short sentences because I have practiced for years. So it's a little bit of muscle memory as well.
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't write anymore long term. If it's longer than 280 characters, I have to really concentrate anymore. But yes, that's true.
David, anything to add?
No, I think that's a good summary.
All right. How about this question? For people who want to do SciComm while in academia and maybe even before taking it to a career, how much time should they dedicate to SciComm? And I suppose there are two paths for this. One is if you want to do SciComm as your career, and the other is if you want to balance academia with SciComm. There might be different answers there, but yes, the question is, how much time dedicated?
The short answer is not more time than you can afford to be not doing your primary work tasks, but a really, really, really common mistake that I see people do is they get a social media account often associated with a conference or a symposium or something where they're going to have lots of content to share, and they tweet 50 times that first weekend, and then they don't do anything again for 6 months. That is the worst possible way to build an audience. You want slow and steady content is better. You should be doing at least a few things every week. If you need a mathy answer here, but what you don't want to do is do a ton right when you first get it and then not touch it for months. There is no secret to building a giant audience on social media. We did an analysis a few years ago that we ended up not publishing because the answer was so boring. But we looked at all of ocean science, marine biology, ocean conservation, Twitter, and analyzed what factors were associated with who had the most followers. Is it the people who work on sharks versus the people who work on plankton? Is it career stage? Is it how prestigious your university is? Is it what continent are you based on? It's none of that. The only factor that was significant and who has the most Twitter followers is who tweets the most. That's it. Tweet more, you'll get more followers on Twitter, and the same is true of other platforms. It matters what you say, it matters how you say it, it matters when you say it, it matters how often you say it, but someone who has 10,000 posts is going to have more followers than someone who has 50 posts all the time. And you may not need to build a big audience if you establish yourself as a subject area expert in a particular subfield. If you know someone who has a big audience and is happy to occasionally share your stuff. For me, I am often the primary one getting certain messages out. It matters that I have a large audience myself because I'm also doing that for other people. But if you're someone who is maybe 1 or 2 times a year, you have something big you want to say, it's probably not worth the time investment and certainly not worth the stress of building up a large audience if you know someone who has one who's happy to a few times a year to share your stuff for you.
Bill? Sorry,
No.
sorry, Bill or Molly? I think that was great advice,
This
David.
isn't
Thank you.
answering the initial question, but I just want to mention we've been talking a lot about Twitter, but there are other social media platforms, and I personally spend much more of my time on Instagram. And Bill and I have, with everything that's been going on with Twitter now, we've recently reworked some of our strategy for Instagram. And so I'd say Instagram and Facebook they're more complex than Twitter in terms of the types of media that you can make and the types of posts you can make. And so Instagram Reels are just doing so well right now. If you want to get into Instagram, work on some Reels. That's really, the numbers on those are pretty amazing. And it's something that Instagram is pushing, and every platform has different features that it likes to push with its algorithms, and they're like constantly changing. So it's a lot to keep up with, but I just wanted to make sure we didn't forget about some of the other platforms.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in that again, going back to the audience question, but we still do. Twitter is very important for the reasons that David said. That's where the journalists are, and and policymakers, and so we definitely have to think about it. But we're pivoting more and more to Instagram, just in terms of the general U.S. taxpayer audience that we're commissioned to reach, because the engagement there for us is way higher on Instagram. We'll get, if we're lucky, a few hundred likes usually on a Twitter post, and we'll get tens of thousands of likes, hundreds of thousands of likes on Instagram. In terms of sheer numbers for us, we found that it's just literally orders of magnitude more engagement than on Twitter. Again, Twitter is important because those fewer people are important people, but it's important to look again at your audience and where they are, like we've been saying.
I definitely did want to ask about other platforms, and you kind of answered one of the questions that was asked in the audience, which is which platforms tend to get the most amount of engagement. And it sounds like Instagram has been exceptionally popular. It might be because of all the gorgeous pictures that NASA can create and put out. And so reels are interesting, though. I have never made a reel. We might need to start that.
Yeah, just to say,
yeah.
with Instagram, talking about the pros and cons of different things. If you have amazing imagery or or access to incredible video or things like that, or an expert talking about how something in the universe is formed or blowing up or whatever it is you people do all day, Instagram can be amazing. But a lot of what I do is sharing links, and Instagram is not good at that. If my goal is get people to read this article, get people to read this paper, get people to sign this petition, Instagram lets you share one link at a time in your profile. That's why you see the phrase link in bio. And there are some third-party services that let you make a landing page from that. There's one that's called Linktree that's very popular. So you have your Linktree that's in your bio, and then from there it links to everything else. I get less than 1% of the link clicks that I do from a similar number of engagement on Twitter, just from people having to go through that extra step. So it depends on what you're trying to do.
Very important.
Yeah, in the conservation world, I've often had some of my consulting clients say that they'd rather get 50 people who are really engaged to learn about an issue than 50,000 random people who are not going to do anything further about it. So it all this depends on your goals. It depends on what you're trying to do. It depends on who you're trying to reach and why. But definitely, I have seen unbelievable numbers of likes and views on Instagram, and it doesn't translate to anything. It doesn't lead to for me at least, it doesn't lead to new followers. It doesn't lead to people getting involved in the campaign. So it all depends on your goals.
Yeah, that's exactly right. An important caveat to what I was saying, and also an argument for a multi-platform approach too. So, I mean, we're typically, if we have an item, we're typically posting on all of our platforms in different ways. So we make sure we got a beautiful picture on Instagram. We make sure we have a good call to action on Twitter, and so we're doing it all, except for TikTok. We can't speak to TikTok. We are forbidden by law to use TikTok at NASA. So fortunately, because I am not a good dancer, so it's a blessing.
Whoops, let me go over and make sure that we have answered all of the questions, because we might have done it. All right, I'm going to actually do something a bit odd, I think. And I'm going to flip this panel now over to the participants who are here. So just show of hands, how many of you have any kind of social media account? You can use the little raised hand button in the reaction. Okay, wow. Got quite a few people. All right.
Hey, I follow some of you. It's awesome.
Good. So we are reaching the audience then. All right, what else? So how, so there are so many of you out there, and I know that there are like hundreds and thousands more grad students, postdocs, and professors who aren't in this audience right now, but who do use social media, and it can be a lot. It can be pretty heavy content too. So panelists, I wonder, I'm going to phrase this very carefully, but I wonder if you can share some maybe mental tricks to keep space between stuff on social media and enthusiasm and positivity about the work that you do. Like, what can you do to I think I'm asking what do you do to protect yourselves like mentally, because it can be kind of rough.
I'll say that if you're the sort of person who, if 1,000 of your trusted colleagues tell you that you're brilliant and amazing, and one random person who you don't know tells you that you suck, and that makes you worry if you suck, don't do this, because there will 100% of the time there'll be some random guy telling you suck. He has no idea if you suck. He's just saying it to be a jerk, but that really gets to people. I find having a dog helps. I find just walking away helps. That you do not have to participate in every fight you're invited to. And you can just say, nope, you're a jerk. I'm not going to engage with you further. And you don't even need to explicitly say that. You can just say it in your head.
I don't know if it's,
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
no, go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and one that I had to make to someone I work with recently who was upset of that some people didn't like a video that she'd made, and I said, but look at all the people who did like it. Yeah, it can definitely get you down, but also I tend to focus on the people who do really like what we're doing there, and like the vast majority of our comments are positive, and there are trolls for sure, and sometimes I think approaching them with a little bit of a sense of humor too is necessary. I often Bill and I will often message each other with like what we would wish we could say to these people, but we don't, so we get out steam that way a little bit. But yeah, I think it's really important to take a break, and because you can get really caught up in it for sure.
I don't know if this is just too Pollyanna, but one of the things that motivates me is that I love putting true and positive content on the internet. I'm very, very lucky that that's my job. I take a lot of comfort in when, people are being critical or whatever, that it's so cool that every day I get to go to work and put out factual, interesting content that people often find motivational or inspiring. And I think that anybody who's in the sciences can say the same thing to some extent. And I just take a lot of comfort in thinking that, we're actually contributing to the general betterment of things. I think that by far the majority of people that we interact with feel the same way. And we just have to let that override that smaller percentage that wants to be negative.
So we are nearing the top of the hour, and as I'm going to ask the panelists to go around once more and see if they have any final thoughts. But as you're doing this, if you'd like to click on the last link that I put into the chat, that is for the last Slido question that I will ask. And it's just a general question of, if you use social media, what do you use it for? Again, I know so many of you are out there using social media. What kind of relationship do you have with it? And I would like to know also, this isn't a question, but you can write it in the chat, if anything you learned today is going to help you moving forward. So please feel free to share your thoughts. We definitely love to hear feedback. And now I will go to the panelists. Any final thoughts for for the audience, both those who are here and those who will watch this recording at a later time?
Oh, Bill unmuted. I thought he was going. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
The key point here is you don't have to guess how to do this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to stumble around in the dark. Lots of people have done this. Lots of people have figured out what works and what doesn't, and lots of people have shared that stuff with others. Really important to no, don't just go out there and become clones of us, but certainly learn from our mistakes and learn from our successes. And I would say 99% of the people who I know who do this are always happy to answer questions about, hey, why did you do it that way? And usually there's a reason.
I think that's a great point, and I'll just follow up on what I was saying earlier. Don't do it just to do it. Don't put too much time in it. Don't kill yourself over it. But I'd encourage this audience to please do social media for the reasons I was saying earlier. You know, find out how to do it, make it work, have fun with it, because the world needs it. You know, I'm just in a mood that way today, I guess. But you know, please get the word about science out there, and the amazing things that are happening in your research, and how amazing nature is and how important it is to protect it. You know, do this work. It's worth doing, and the more of us that are doing it, the better. So you know, go out and have fun with it.
Yeah, I think just to go off of that, you know, you are our best assets. I think the great thing about social media is to show what science looks like, what science is, to break down the stereotypes of what it is, for people to be able to connect with you as individuals. And you could say, I'm a person and a scientist. You know, I go a little nuts when people are like, well, science tells us blah, blah, blah. You know, science is a big thing, but it's diverse and it's beautiful. And you're doing it. So I think the power of social media is that you can share that. And that's why I like doing what I do, because I get to share that as well.
That was wonderfully said, every single one of you. Unfortunately, it looks like we are out of time. So I want to thank you all again for being here and for sharing your thoughts with us and your experiences. We really appreciate it. So round of applause for you. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone who will ever watch this video, how much we value the time you spent with us today.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for having us. And yeah.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks, Jessica.
All right, everyone. I will see you all next time. And feel free to email me if you have any follow-up questions, and hope to see you at the next PAWS event. Take care.